It's a date with destiny tonight, a race that could make history. As rich countries hurry to protect their own people from COVID-19, the developing world must try to keep up. Jamaica's normally a favourite, not this time, with just 5% of its population vaccinated. On 9%, South Africa's looking to break monopolies held by the big pharmaceutical companies, so countries like Bangladesh can produce vaccines for themselves. Over 100 governments support the call to lift vaccine patents, but not Germany, putting profit before lives. And no way, says Great Britain, holding millions of doses more than it needs. The United States says it's in favour, but hey, leadership's about action, right? Just ask Uganda. With less than 1% of its people vaccinated, you've got to say, folks, no chance at all. And they're off, the wealthy countries surging ahead. Hang on, what's this? Agony for the developing world out of this race. They just can't compete. We all want to see an end to the pandemic. Until every country is vaccinated, the only winner is the virus.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our dynamic town hall for vaccine justice. And I want to welcome everybody who's joining us today from across the country. And we want to thank you for being part of today's town hall. But most importantly, we want to thank you for taking the initiative and supporting the call for Canada to step up to achieve vaccine justice. My name is Nikki Ashton. I'm the NDP Member of Parliament for Churchill-Keewatinook, Aski, and I'm pleased to be part of this town hall. I'm joining you from my home in Thompson on Treaty 5 territory, the traditional territory of the Nisichawasik Cree Nation. And first, I want to thank the People's Vaccine Alliance for sharing that video you just saw. And now, of course, some of those statistics have changed a bit over the last few months, but not by much. The main point of the global north hoarding vaccines and preventing the global south from accessing vaccines and ensuring production still remains. The urgency, I would say, not just remains, but is even greater as we face the new variant that we've all heard about, the Omicron variant. And today, that is what we are here to talk about, how we can effect change, how we can push Canada to be part of achieving vaccine justice, access to vaccines in the global south, with a particular focus as well on the case of Bolivia and a Canadian drug manufacturer, BioNiagara. I want to make clear that today's town hall brings together a Canadian drug manufacturer, BioNiagara, and a country in the global south, Bolivia, who are asking that the government of Canada take action. And we want to make clear that we stand with them, and so many Canadians stand with them, and we stand together in sharing a clear message. Our message today is that Canada must ensure that BioNiagara, a Canadian drug manufacturer based in St. Catharines, Ontario, can produce life-saving COVID-19 vaccines ordered and paid for by Bolivia. This means that Canada must grant the compulsory license that would enable this production to take place. And let's be clear, these vaccines will save lives. These vaccines will slow down the spread of COVID-19. Let's also be clear that Canada currently is part of the problem. It didn't used to be this way. Canada was part of the solution when it came to global vaccine access. Our publicly owned laboratories, Connaught Labs, used to produce vaccines and used to be part of the solution when it came to dealing with pandemics previously and other diseases. Our government privatized Connaught Labs, and over the last few decades has clearly shown itself to be in favor, whether it's liberal or conservative, in favor of big pharmaceutical companies and their profits, rather than making sure that vaccines are accessible more easily to Canadians and people around the world. We are here to say that this status quo must change, and we need to deal with this urgently to be able to save lives around the world, including here at home. Today, you will hear from many people, experts in this area, advocates in this area, and people that are part of the solution. You will hear from, first of all, from Vice Minister Blanco, the Bolivian Vice Minister for Trade and Integration, who will be presenting on behalf of the government of Bolivia. Vice Minister Blanco has been working for Bolivians' access to vaccines and has an agreement with the Canadian manufacturer BioNiagara, which only needs Canada's approval to get things underway. You will also hear from John Fulton, president of BioNiagara and spokesperson and project partner at BioNiagara Pharma Corporation. Mr. Fulton, in cooperation with Knowledge Ecology International, has coordinated the Bolivia BioNiagara application request for a compulsory license to produce and export COVID-19 vaccines to LMIC nations under Canada's access to medicines regime. We also have Brittany Lambert with us. She's the women's rights policy specialist with Oxfam Canada. Oxfam has played a key role in the People's Vaccine Alliance, taking on big pharmaceutical companies and calling on governments to put people's lives before profit and waive intellectual property rights on COVID vaccines. You will hear from leading global voices on vaccine equity, KEI, and Luis Gil Abinader. Luis is a senior researcher at Knowledge Ecology International, who is focused on intellectual property laws, on trade, and on access to medicine. KEI is a nonprofit focused on social justice for marginalized groups, advocating for access to knowledge and access to affordable medicines. We are pleased also to be sharing with you a brief presentation from Nima Machouf, an epidemiologist expert from Montreal, who will touch on the importance to promote vaccine solidarity and equity around the world. For the second part of the town hall, we will have Raul Burbano with us. Raul is the program director at Common Frontiers. Common Frontiers is a national working group composed of labor, faith-based, and social justice organizations focused on solidarity in the Americas. It was created out of the fight against neoliberal trade policies. Their guiding principles include the recognition and defense of democracy, human and labor rights, environmental justice, and strong public services. From the Council of Canadians, our host for today, Nikolas Barry-Shaw. He is the campaigner on trade and privatization for the Council of Canadians who organized this event. The Council of Canadians brings people together through grassroots organizing, always ready to speak truth to power, to fight for people, for the environment, and for democracy. And I'm very happy also to welcome Angella MacEwen to the town hall. Angella is the Trade and Justice Network's co-chair and an economist for CUPE National. With the Trade Justice Network, Angella is involved in fighting for a more sustainable, equitable, and socially just international trade regime. Canadian-based networks and advocacy organizations are clear. Canadians expect better from their government. Canada needs to drop the facade on the world stage that we are being benevolent when it comes to vaccines. The government of Canada is choosing to side with big pharmaceutical companies instead of finding ways to make vaccines available to the global south and producing them here in Canada. The deal between BioNiagara and Bolivia is good for the people of Bolivia. It is good for Canadian workers and communities. It is good for our world. It is time for Canada to act. Thank you for being here and demanding action from our government. First, I will introduce a video from Vice Minister Benjamin Blanco, who unfortunately could not be with us live today, but we are so happy to share a presentation prepared by him on the importance of this deal for the people of Bolivia.
Para mí es un gusto poder saludar a los diputados Nikki Ashton, al presidente de BioNiagara y portavoz de BioNiagara Pharma, John Fulton, al investigador principal de Key, Luis Gil Abinader, al responsable de Comercio y Privatización del Consejo Canadiense, Nikolas, a la representante de Oxfam en Canadá, Brittany Lambert, al representante de la Unión de Empleados Públicos, CUPE, Angella, MacEwen, al representante de Common Freuter, Raul, Burbano, a los medios de prensa y a todos los oyentes. La pandemia generada en el año 2019 por la COVID-19 ha dejado un escenario desolador en el mundo. Tenemos una crisis sanitaria, económica, social en la humanidad, lo que invita a una profunda reflexión sobre el actual ser humano en la sociedad. Vemos que las asimetrías se han profundizado, vemos una profunda inequidad en el acceso a la salud, en el acceso a los alimentos, que precisamente ha sido profundizada por esta crisis sanitaria. Siguiendo el análisis de estándares internacionales, para poder salir de esta crisis sanitaria que cada vez se agudiza aún más con variantes que se van generando, es necesario poder alcanzar un nivel de inmunización óptimo a nivel mundial. Esto significa que un 70% de la población mundial debe estar vacunada con el esquema de vacunación completo. Lastimosamente, los países más potentados y sobre todo las empresas farmacéuticas, lejos de poder coadyuvar a que exista una vacunación de rebaño, no tienen la predisposición de acelerar esta meta. Se está sembrando la lamentable idea de que la vacuna ha sido únicamente una herramienta para poder satisfacer intereses económicos de las empresas con más recursos en el mundo. Es por ello que el Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia, partiendo desde su experiencia en el proceso de adquisición de vacunas para el país, ha planteado dos acciones como alternativas para poder facilitar el acceso en relación al acuerdo sobre los aspectos de derechos de propiedad intelectual relacionados con el comercio, los APIC. Por una parte, el tema de la liberación de patentes. Bolivia ha apoyado la propuesta de la India y Sudáfrica de extensión de determinadas disposiciones del acuerdo sobre los APIC a través de la reserva de los APIC ante emergencias sanitarias, para permitir que todos los países no otorguen ni hagan cumplir la protección de propiedad intelectual durante el tiempo que dura la pandemia, hasta que se haya logrado una vacunación generalizada, hasta que se tenga una inmunidad de rebaño. El Consejo de los APIC de la Organización Mundial de Comercio ha debatido esta propuesta con el apoyo de decenas de países y cientos de organizaciones civiles. Sin embargo, algunos países desarrollados impiden el avance y lo bloquean argumentando que los mecanismos existentes en la OMC, como lo son las licencias obligatorias, están funcionando y que más bien se debería apelar a los mecanismos ya existentes. Bolivia ha demostrado cada día el fracaso de estos mecanismos. Cabe resaltar que en las últimas circunstancias han atenuado la necesidad de llegar a una decisión clara sobre la liberación de patentes. Las nuevas variantes están causando nuevamente cierres de frontera y no tenemos certeza de una solución pronta. Con la suspensión de la conferencia ministerial de la OMC, en la cual se iba a abordar y se iba a avanzar en estos temas, las esperanzas de una pronta solución se van debilitando y creemos firmemente que el tiempo perdido en debatir el tema sin generar respuestas inmediatas va a significar más vidas que se ponen en peligro. Por otra parte, tenemos como propuesta la emisión de autorizaciones voluntarias o obligatorias. Este mecanismo que ya está planteado, que ya ha sido acordado por los países que formamos parte de la OMC, se supone ha sido diseñado para circunstancias como estas, que se requiere priorizar la vida sobre los intereses de unas cuantas farmacéuticas. Dada que esta negociación está trabada para poder lograr una extensión temporal de las patentes de las vacunas, Bolivia planteó utilizar la flexibilidad de las licencias obligatorias. Sobre el particular, cabe resaltar que el artículo 31 y el artículo 31 bis de los APIC se contemplan flexibilidades sobre la protección de las patentes. Una de ellas son las licencias obligatorias, que son autorizaciones que otorga un gobierno para utilizar una invención patentada sin el consentimiento del titular de la patente. En el artículo 31 permite condiciones para emitir esta licencia, que consiste en que la persona o la empresa solicitante de la licencia primero debe negociar en términos comerciales una licencia voluntaria con el titular de la patente, y si es que este camino no se logra un acuerdo, puede emitirse o puede solicitarse una licencia obligatoria. Para tal efecto, Bolivia ha tomado contacto con el CEI, organización que se dedica al acceso de los medicamentos y las vacunas, con oficinas en Washington y en Ginebra. CEI colabora con la empresa canadiense BioLife Pharma, que tiene la capacidad de fabricar alrededor de 20 millones de vacunas contra el COVID-19 por año. Concretamente, el país logró firmar un convenio con la empresa canadiense BioLife Pharma para fabricar e importar 15 millones de vacunas monodosis de Johnson & Johnson, siempre y cuando se logre una licencia obligatoria. Posteriormente, Bolivia inició el proceso de licencia obligatoria, hemos notificado su uso como país importador y hemos solicitado que Canadá, conforme a su legislación, notifique su intención de ser país exportador, ya que BioLife Pharma tiene domicilio en Canadá, por lo que se requiere la voluntad política de Canadá para efectivizar esas licencias obligatorias. La firma de este convenio se ha dado en mayo de este año. Es un convenio, es un contrato entre dos signatarios, por un lado Bolivia y por otro lado BioLife. En esa oportunidad estuvimos acompañados del director de la División de Propiedad Intelectual de la OMC, y él indicó que este paso proporciona una respuesta práctica de lo que podría ser un proceso más amplio en el que los países señalen necesidades urgentes e insatisfechas y fomenten una respuesta combinada y coordinada de los socios internacionales. Esto ha sido en mayo y, sin embargo, al día de hoy vemos que Bolivia tiene una experiencia fallida, toda vez que depende de la voluntad de un tercero que no muestra interés en aplicar el mecanismo, y en consecuencia se verifica que los estándares internacionales no están conforme a las necesidades de nuestros pueblos, ni son bastante efectivos, ni mucho menos oportuno, ya que cada día que pasa significa vidas perdidas. Hemos apelado a los procedimientos actualmente existentes. Llevamos ya varios meses en este trámite. En algún momento se decía de que para que funcionen las licencias obligatorias se deberían tener empresas farmacéuticas que tengan, por un lado, la tecnología, tengan la capacidad de producción de las vacunas. Bueno, Bolivia ha suscrito precisamente un contrato con una de estas empresas, que es BioLife y que tiene sede en Canadá. Sin embargo, no podemos echar a andar el procedimiento debido a que precisamente Canadá no da su conformidad o no se notifica como país exportador para poder utilizar los actuales procedimientos que se tienen en la Organización Mundial del Comercio. Yo quiero valorar y agradecer este espacio que nos permite alzar la voz para pedir a las autoridades tomar con responsabilidad esta petición que abraza la oportunidad de alcanzar esa anhelada meta de llegar a la inmunización mayoritaria. En este escenario debemos demostrar que nuestra posición nos permite tomar decisiones rápidas y claras. De lo contrario, solamente estamos demostrando el fracaso de lo que hemos construido a nivel multilateral. Llamamos a los gobiernos, llamamos a las empresas farmacéuticas a priorizar la vida sobre todas las cosas. Debemos salir todos juntos de esta pandemia y para eso es necesaria la colaboración de todos. Esperamos que este camino que viene recorriendo Bolivia en la utilización de licencias obligatorias marque la senda para que otros países en desarrollo o menos desarrollados, como los países africanos, tengan acceso a vacunas de manera oportuna, de manera equitativa y a precios económicos, que no sean las vacunas una excusa para seguir enriqueciendo a unas cuantas empresas transnacionales. Agradecemos a todos la presencia y agradecemos una vez más este espacio para poder explicar la posición de Bolivia.
Thank you so much to Vice Minister Blanco. Muchísimas gracias al Viceministro Blanco. We heard a clear message about what Bolivia is dealing with, what the global South is dealing with. And I think so many of us that are tuned in today are very much in solidarity with what they are calling for, and very much support doing what we can to push Canada to stop being an obstacle and be part of the solution. I also want to encourage folks to share any questions or comments that you might have in the chat. We will be able to display selected questions throughout this event for panelists, for speakers, for all of us. And after every presentation, we can pose, depending obviously on how many questions we have and how much time is left, we can pose those questions, and we can certainly make sure that those questions are relayed to speakers if we're short on time. So please, if you have any questions or comments, do not hesitate to share them in the chat. Our next speaker is Brittany Lambert from Oxfam Canada. Oxfam, which has played a key role in the People's Vaccine Alliance, taking on big pharmaceutical companies and calling on the governments of the global north to act. Brittany, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today. And so we've just heard about Bolivia and some of the challenges that they're experiencing in securing vaccines. And unfortunately, Bolivia is just one of the many middle and low-income countries that are struggling to access vaccines right now. And that, this gap that we're seeing is contributing to the huge disparities between low-income countries and high-income countries like Canada, a gap so big that it's been called by many experts the vaccine apartheid. And if we sort of analyze and take a few steps back and analyze the real core of the problem here, it's a lack of global supply. The world is failing to scale up a vaccine supply fast enough to meet the need. But make no mistake, this vaccine shortage is not an accident. It's an intentional, artificial vaccine shortage. And this is because intellectual property rules currently allow the big pharmaceutical companies that we've all heard of, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Pfizer, BioNTech, it allows them to monopolize vaccine production globally. And so you have other capable manufacturers like BioLies that are willing and ready to make vaccines, but that aren't currently allowed to do so. And, this makes no sense because it basically leaves control of the global vaccine supply. It leaves the control in the hands of a small number of global pharmaceutical companies whose main goal is to maximize their own profits. And so big pharma companies have used their monopolies to prioritize the most profitable contracts with the richest governments, which has left low-income countries out in the cold. The wealthy governments can pay 5 times the price of the vaccines, and that's why they're being prioritized. And so, the strategy is working just as intended. These companies are making tons of money, unfathomable amounts of money. We recently analyzed the latest company reports for Pfizer, Moderna, and BioNTech, and found that these companies are making combined profits of $65,000 every minute. So you have this kind of split screen reality where on one hand you have runaway profits by pharmaceutical companies, and on the other hand you've got accelerating deaths in low-income countries. On one hand you've got COVID vaccines that have made billionaires in these pharmaceutical companies, the owners, the shareholders. And on the other hand, the lack of COVID vaccines in low-income countries is causing the pandemic to go on, ongoing lockdowns, ongoing toll on the weakest economies that we're struggling to begin with, and the weakest people within these economies. It's destroying livelihoods, it's making hunger skyrocket, and of course, we're seeing people like women are taking the greatest toll of all, are getting experiencing the greatest toll of all, since they're in the most precarious, low-paid jobs that are first to suffer when lockdown measures get imposed. And so, rich countries so far have tried to donate their way out of the pandemic by sending their surplus vaccines to developing countries. But this isn't working. Vaccine donations are hard to plan for. They're unpredictable. Sometimes they don't arrive when they're supposed to. Sometimes they arrive with no notice. Sometimes they arrive near or past expiry. Sometimes they arrive without syringes. And most importantly, rich countries are falling way short of their promises in terms of how many doses they're actually sending. Of the 1.8 billion COVID vaccine donations that were promised by rich countries by the end of the year, we found that only 14% had been delivered by late October. So they're falling scandalously short of their promises. And so I think this goes to show that trickle-down vaccine charity is not the solution here. Developing countries and generic manufacturers ultimately need the right and the formula, the recipes, to make their own doses and to be able to have control over their vaccine supply. So that's our analysis of the issue. I'll let other colleagues lead you through some of the solutions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brittany. And before we move on to other parts of the discussion, I did want to share a question with you, but also just acknowledge, your leadership, Oxfam's leadership on this front. Particularly appreciate the gender lens, and we know obviously a lot of women are also on the front lines of care work, and also much more susceptible in that sense to COVID on those front lines. So yeah, we hear you loud and clear on the urgency and the need to put people's lives ahead of profit. Thank you, Brittany. And now, one of the questions that often comes up when it comes to the discussions around the global south is that of vaccine hesitancy. And some have said that the real problem in some of these countries is vaccine hesitancy. What do you and Oxfam have to say about that?
I guess I would say that, yes, vaccine hesitancy is an issue. It's an issue everywhere in developing and developed countries alike, and it absolutely needs to be tackled. But I would also say that a low supply actually breeds hesitancy, right? Here in Canada, where we have ample vaccines, it's so mainstream. Everybody's getting the vaccine, everybody's talking about it. The government can credibly campaign to increase vaccine uptake because it actually has vaccines to offer people. And that is not the case in some places. So I would say it's not a surprise that there is hesitancy in places where there's low supply, and that the fundamental issue really is supply. If you look at the numbers, sub-Saharan Africa only has received enough doses to vaccinate 1 in 8 people. So it's not like they're rolling in vaccines, that they're just refusing to take it. And I would also say that, if we say, well, the real issue is vaccine hesitancy, it's almost like saying, well, they don't deserve vaccines because they're hesitant. Nobody's saying that Canadians who are vaccine hesitant don't deserve vaccines, or that Canada shouldn't procure enough vaccines to vaccine everybody when they choose to get a vaccine. And so I think it's important to remember that as well, right? We should be making sure, first and foremost, that there are enough vaccines for everybody, and then, credibly able to campaign in these countries to make sure that people understand the value of getting these vaccines.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brittany, for your words. And I know we're going to loop back to you a bit later on as well. But for now, we'll move on to our next speaker, a voice on the global level for vaccine equity from KEI, Luis Gil Abinader. Luis is a senior researcher at Knowledge Ecology International, and he and KEI have been critical in this groundbreaking work with respect to BioLease and Bolivia. Luis?
Thank you, Nikki. So we're witnessing a disconnect between the message that Canada has been delivering to the international community and the actions of its own government at home. So at the World Trade Organization, Canada has been claiming that their access to medicine regime works, quote unquote, as intended. And Canada has also been saying that this mechanism is the type of approach that should be used to address intellectual property barriers during the pandemic. So basically what they're suggesting is that instead of a waiver, countries should grant this type of compulsory licenses. Yet Canada refuses to take the steps required to trigger the access to medicine regime in the context of COVID-19. And in particular, Canada refuses to add COVID-19 to Schedule 1 of the Patent Act. And by doing that, Canada is blocking the use of compulsory licenses to save lives in Bolivia. And so the way we see it, that is a remarkable act of hypocrisy. So just shortly after COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, Canada amended its patent law to facilitate the grant of compulsory licenses and to supply its own market and protect its own citizens. What we're calling for here today is for Canada to act with an urgency similar to the one it used last year when it amended the Patent Act to protect Canadians, because saving lives in Bolivia is just as important as it is to save lives in Canada. And I'll stop there. Thank you again, Nikki.
Well, thank you very much, Luis, and to KEI for your leadership on this front, and also for shining a light on what where Canada stands at the global level, and the extent to which our hypocrisy is obviously a huge part of the problem here. We say one thing and are doing quite evidently the other. So thank you very much, Luis. And next we will go to John Fulton, president of BioNiagara and spokesperson and project partner at BioLease Pharma Corporation, joining us from St. Catharines, Ontario. Hello, John.
Hi, Nikki. Thanks for having me today. And I put a shout out to Vice Minister Blanco for his presentation today. It was very, very informative, comprehensive. And the rest of the team of presenters here, thank you for attending. My number one action item here today is really to demonstrate the importance of the patent waiver / TRIPS waiver. And really all I have to say is I shouldn't have to knock on Minister Champagne's and Prime Minister Trudeau's door for 10 months just to get an answer on how to trigger or to start the process to acquire or to sign up for a compulsory license to be able to produce vaccines for Bolivia. If you look at the timeline here, Bolivia notified the WTO in February 2021 that they intended to use the 31 bis TRIPS within the TRIPS agreement to allow them to import vaccines for COVID-19 from a country like Canada. I add as a side note, right now, let's just say if you're in Bolivia or any other country that's dealing with a domestic health emergency, you start Googling, and you find that, oh, look at Canada in 2007 successfully exported therapeutics for HIV/AIDS to Rwanda, and it's the only example of a WTO country in the history of the TRIPS agreement producing and exporting medicines to a country in need. So you find this on Google and you go, well, it looks like now it's called the Canada's Access to Medicines Regime. At the time, it was called the Jean Chrétien Pledge to Africa Act. So you Google it, you get the website up, and you try to find this list of drugs and to see if the drug you're looking for your country's emergency is on that list. And you click on the link on the camera website, and it's a broken link. You get like a 404 response. And so, we'll call it. Let's call them. Let's get the main number, call the main number, and it's out of service. And and I think it's been like that for 10 years. So that's a problem. I don't know where what the bottleneck is with that, but I personally have been in touch with all the top people in the Canadian government, asking them to have that website repaired, to either take it down or fix it. Fix the phone number, fix the link to the list of drugs that are available to countries dealing with emergencies. So that I see that as a problem, and I see the bigger problem being that I've been full time with a team that's been loaned to me from Knowledge Ecology International. We're the experts really in the world on using Canada's Access to Medicines regime, using this mechanism, and 10 months full time, trying to get an answer, not going through the process. We can't get the government to even speak to us and give us a yes or a no on how to start the process. And it's really not a matter of knowing how to start the process. The process starts when you make the call. You say, I have a patented drug. That's the only requirement. The only requirement is that the drug be patented. You don't have to have a customer. You don't have to have a plant. You don't have to have a notice of compliance, nothing. You just have to make that request and the process starts. And there really is no wiggle room to stop that process. But it's kind of genius on their part. They just basically don't talk to us, and it allows the process not to trigger. So I'll kind of leave it at that and get into it more later.
I mean, thank you so much, John. And clearly some very shameful actions on the part of Canada. Many of us that have worked with you know that you've been on this for quite some time. And I think, the question, something that's on the mind of many is that this deal isn't only good for the global South, which should in and of itself trigger action, but it's good for Canadian community, Canadian workers, the Canadian economy, and yet Canada is still not allowing for this important deal to go through between BioLease and Bolivia. So thank you so much, John, for sharing this and sort of the internal side of things here. First, I want to go to a comment that we have, and again, I want to encourage folks that are tuning in. Please feel free to share comments and questions. We had a comment from Marilyn Hay on Facebook, who points out that big pharma companies are not letting their intellectual property being used by other manufacturers. And she said, "I'd like to." And then we'll connect. I'd like to ask Luis. Sorry. Okay, well, there you go. There's Marilyn's comment. And then coming out of that, I'd like to ask Luis what big pharmaceutical companies have been responding to with questions to give voluntary licenses. And John, I'm curious to know what your experience with large companies has been up to there. So Luis and John, a question there.
So there are many arguments that we have been hearing for over a year from big pharmaceutical companies to refuse the idea of technology transfer, voluntary licenses, and compulsory licenses. So we have heard that supposedly it will take too long for a manufacturer like BioLease to start producing vaccines if they engage in a voluntary license. That's really not true. We have seen and we have studied at KI how long does it actually take for a company like BioLease to start producing once they obtain a voluntary license and once they obtain the know-how to manufacture that. And it actually takes about 4 months, maybe 6 months in some cases. And we have been asking for this compulsory licenses for over 10 months. And so at this point, BioLease could have been definitely manufactured for Bolivia. Another argument that we have heard is that there is no manufacturing capacity. And yet here you have a company that is actually based in Canada that could be doing vaccines now with the support of the Canadian government, with a compulsory license or with a voluntary license. And it's just lack of urgency and lack of political will to allow that company to start producing. So there's not true that there's no manufacturing capacity. There's no urgency in using the existing manufacturing capacity. We have also heard that companies like BioLease are too small to be interesting. And yet BioLease can produce a number of vaccines, up to 20 million a year, that could vaccinate, that protects the population of Bolivia, an entire country. And the idea that that's not enough to save the entire country of Bolivia is really is just offensive. And so, and then, we've heard that they alone can do it, that they could distribute vaccine. And we have heard that for over a year. And yet what we see time to time, every day we see the painful data about so many people that are dying and remain unvaccinated because we didn't do all that was available, all the policies that were available, and to scale up the manufacture of COVID-19 vaccines.
So coming out of that, John, I think many of us are curious to know, what has your experience been with some of the large pharmaceuticals in recent months?
Well, we going back to April, May 2020, we started reaching out to production partners, AstraZeneca, so any of the adenovirus vector platforms. That's what BioLise has. Actually, it was in 2017 the company started building their biologics plant, purchased bioreactors, high-speed fill. There's three high-speed fill lines sitting there that right now, if you wanted to purchase them, you're looking at 2 to 3 years to have them built, shipped, and validated. It's all on site. So the company started 2017 building this plant. It's not something that just happens overnight. All the water purification systems, air filtration systems, bioreactors, fill lines were all purchased and shipped and are on site. So it was we actually, to back up a bit, we were contacted by Deloitte in April, May 2020. They had been hired by the government of Canada as a contractor to go out and look and see what kind of production capacity there is in Canada. And it turns out BioLise is, as far as I know, the only company that's a Health Canada's GMP, GLP, sterile fill, injectable drug manufacturer, currently producing injectable drugs that are many of them are being shipped to low and middle income countries. We have a distribution network throughout the world. So this is an industrial facility that is approved by Health Canada to produce any kind of drug, any kind of vaccine or therapeutic. It's an injectable drug. So Deloitte was actually quite excited when they stumbled on BioLise. They thought they had hit, pay dirt, so to speak, when they discovered this facility was there. So, and I believe they went back to the COVID-19 vaccine task force and introduced what we had at the facility, and then things seemed to stop there. We didn't really hear back too much after that. So I don't really understand why, the company's sitting on all this equipment, and they're not getting support from the government to make sure that this happens, make sure this compulsory license happens. So, but as far as dealing with other manufacturers, to this date we haven't found a company that wants to partner and take advantage of the manufacturing capacity that's sitting here. So it's when I reached out to James Love at KEI in March, just about a month after Bolivia identified that they were willing to use the TRIPS agreement. I reached out to James Love at KEI and said, hey, we're having trouble trying to find a partner to take advantage of this manufacturing capacity. And so I said, well, it's time to ask for a compulsory license so we can start helping countries in need.
Right on. And here we are today, continuing to push for that. But there's many, many more of us. I want to move to another question and give Brittany and John and Luis a chance to answer. Many ask, don't IP rules contribute to innovation? Shouldn't the companies that invested money into developing these vaccines reap the profits as an incentive? Brittany?
I mean, yes, this is the worldview that companies and wealthy countries use to defend the current system. But I would say a few things to that. I would say, first of all, nobody's saying let's abolish all patents forever, right? This is an exceptional global health emergency that's affecting everyone everywhere. That's not going to go away until the world is vaccinated. And so, some temporary exceptional measures I think are very much justified. I would also point to the huge public investment that has gone into these companies to help accelerate the production of these vaccines, or the development of these vaccines. Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna received over $100 billion of public taxpayer money to help accelerate research and development of vaccines. So I think we can safely say that these should be a public good. And then I guess thirdly, I would say these these vaccine companies, we should be able to celebrate them as heroes. That would be nice. They've created these vaccines that are, should be able to help save the world. But instead, when they're, holding on to their wealth and preventing huge swaths of the population from getting the access to the vaccines that they need, it's hard to see them as anything but villains. And so, I think it would be in their interest also to redistribute and share the know-how and technology so that we can celebrate them instead of, pointing to their downfalls.
Luis, John?
Well, I think it's important to note that, I think the last figures are 6% of the world's lower income population is vaccinated. So I think it's safe to say that the half dozen companies that are producing vaccines, they're just not filling the need. So I believe from my conversations with other manufacturers that are sitting on the sidelines, there's capacity out there to fill that gap. BioNiagara being one of them, established in 1979. They're right here in St. Catharines. They're ready to go, ready to start producing. The company still would like some kind of help from the government, as far, even if it's just moving this the compulsory license ask through Parliament. If you look at the timeline on how quickly our government pushed through, and Lewis mentioned this earlier, in March 2020, in a blink of an eye, the government pushed through legislation that basically said, these are my words, anybody manufacturing anything COVID that's patented in Canada, just start making it. Okay, we'll worry about remunerating the patent holders later. And what would normally take 7 months to a year, they did it in a matter of days. They pushed it through in one cabinet meeting, order in council. And so actually, if you go back to 2005, 2006, during the bird flu crisis, we reverse engineered Tamiflu, also Tamiflu is the generic Tamiflu, which is also Tamiflu. We had reverse engineered it, secured our own biomass for the API, and applied for a compulsory license. We had to get the drug on Schedule 1 to go through the process, and it took 7 months, which is a normal amount of time for legislation to move through the House of Commons. Of course, March 2020 here, we did it very quickly for Canadians, which is great, but we're just really not willing to do this for countries in need. So, they've demonstrated they can do this. The government can do this. They can do it. My ask is add COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics to Schedule 1 of the Patent Act, and let companies like BioNiagara start to produce these essential medicines.
Right on. Luis, would you have anything to share on this question?
I maybe just go back to what Brittany said, that the reason why we have vaccines right now for COVID-19 is because of massive public investments in research and development. Governments took the bill on the basic science early on for decades. In the case of mRNA platforms, in the case of viral vector platforms, they also even supported the development of several of these vaccines. They supported the manufacturing of these vaccines. They did the advanced procurement agreement, taking the risk if it failed. And so that is why that public investment explained why we currently have vaccines. So the idea that we wouldn't have vaccines without the intellectual property monopolies, I think is wrong. And maybe just conclude by saying that it is bad public policy to have monopolies, to give pharmaceutical companies monopolies in the middle of a pandemic. I don't think anyone should be allowed to individually call the shots on who gets vaccinated and who doesn't get vaccinated. And intellectual property allows companies to do that. And we're calling for that to be changed by amending Schedule 1, by supporting BioNiagara in their effort to export vaccines to Bolivia.
Mm-hmm. That is a shocking number in term when that you shared, Brittany. To tell us how much public investment went into these vaccines that we all know of as led by private companies. So we have another question from somebody that's tuned in, from Ian Scott, and I wanted to pass it on to you, Brittany. Should I delay my third booster dose to assist in the supply issue? Of course, we all know that third booster shots are now being promoted big time here in Canada. What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks for that question, Ian, and thanks also for the the intention and the solidarity behind it. I think unfortunately the issue is more systemic than that. I don't think that individuals delaying or going without third doses is necessarily going to change much. I think where individuals can have a bigger impact is in advocating to their governments to make the systemic changes needed, to waive intellectual property rights so that countries can produce their own vaccines, I think that's going to be the real key, because as I said, even if this led to a greater supply that could then be donated, there are issues with donations as the main way to get vaccines to developing countries. It's not really the solution we want. So thanks. That's my 2 cents.
So maybe we can say, get your third booster as public health experts are recommending. But maybe before you do that, send an email to your MP, to the Prime Minister, to the ministers involved. Sign up on in terms of the actions that we're going to be recommending on this as part of this town hall. And we hear you loud and clear, Brittany. Is be part of advocating and applying political pressure so that collectively Canada can be part of the solution. Thank you so much, Brittany. So now we're going to turn to a video from Nima Machouf, an epidemiologist expert from Montreal, who will touch on the importance of vaccine solidarity and equity around the world.
Exactement 2 ans que la COVID fait hélas partie de nos vies. Et 5 millions de morts plus tard, nous ne sommes toujours pas arrivés à maîtriser ce fléau. Et à chaque semaine, 5 millions de personnes s'infectent à nouveau. Vous me direz, oui, mais pourtant on a des vaccins et on peut se protéger. Je vous dirais, oui, on a des vaccins, mais c'est pas vrai que tout le monde y a accès. La distribution du vaccin dans le monde est très, très inégale. Et pendant qu'aux États-Unis, on discute à savoir s'il faut vacciner les chiens ou pas, la moitié de la population de la planète n'a même pas accès à ce vaccin-là. Le virus qui cause la COVID est très malin. Ça veut dire que lui, il est capable de muter et de changer de face facilement. Et tant qu'il y aura des gens susceptibles de l'attraper, il va continuer à courir partout et il aura la possibilité de muter et possiblement déjouer notre système immunitaire qu'on vient d'armer par des vaccins à coût de milliards de dollars d'investissement public. La COVID est une maladie très contagieuse et elle se transmet par l'air. Ça veut dire qu'elle voyage aussi rapidement. Et parce que les frontières sont ouvertes, tant que l'autre bout de la planète, il y a des gens qui ne sont pas immunisés, même vous ici, vous ne serez pas en sécurité. Les vaccins contre la COVID sont très efficaces, mais pas suffisants en soi. Tout de même très efficaces dans la lutte contre cette maladie. Mais ils ont été développés essentiellement dans le secteur privé. Les compagnies pharmaceutiques ont par contre bénéficié d'énormes sommes en subventions, en garanties de prêts, en bons de commande, etc. Et juste pendant les 6 premiers mois de cette année, Pfizer, pour n'en nommer qu'une, a fait 16 milliards de dollars de profit. Il est le temps que le privé fasse sa part et participe à cet effort collectif de lutte contre la COVID. Alors, dans le fond, on a besoin de la mondialisation de la solidarité en matière de santé. Pour se débarrasser de la COVID, l'équité vaccinale, c'est pas une option, c'est une nécessité. Et on a le devoir de s'engager là-dedans. Alors, je compte sur vous.
Un grand merci à Angela, Angela dans quelques minutes, mais à Nima Machouf pour ses mots, son message clair. Thank you so much to Nima Machouf for her words and her clear message about the urgent need for global solidarity when it comes to vaccine equity and vaccine access. Thank you so much, Nima, for being part of our town hall and for all of your work and advocacy on this front. We did get a question a bit earlier from somebody participating in this town hall in terms of advocacy, political advocacy. Has there been an opportunity to present this issue on the floor or use NDP influence in a minority government? That's a question from Glenn. And thank you very much for being part of this event and for taking action. So for us in the NDP, this has been a critical issue. This is something that I raised actually earlier in the summer as part of a global summit on vaccine justice from being hosted by Progressive International. And I was able to stand with, leaders from Bolivia and from around the world in calling for vaccine justice. And of course, we had a federal election this September. And right off the bat, as soon as we knew the results, for us, it was really important to host a press conference, a parliamentary press conference, a national press conference, along with my colleague, Don Davies, our NDP health critic, and in support of the call for the call to act for Canada to act, and in conjunction with Bolivia, BioLease, and to be part of the solution when it comes to vaccine access and vaccine production. And we also, I was very proud to sponsor a petition led by the Council of Canadians in very much asking for this. The petition closed this past week, and I will be presenting it in Parliament this coming week, and very thankful for the many people across Canada who signed this petition. For us in the NDP, this has been really important. We've asked questions about this in Parliament, and my colleague Don Davies is continuing to do important work on this front, also on the global level, asking for the TRIPS waiver. And so for us, it's important on all fronts. But what we clearly need is more public pressure. The NDP obviously is a party in opposition, and we have the ability to raise these issues in Parliament. But what we need is your help to pressure MPs on the ground, and particularly government MPs who are part of a government, the Justin Trudeau government, that is talking a good talk on the global stage, but is doing the opposite on the ground. As you heard clearly from Brittany Lambert and others, vaccine donations are not sustainable, are not dependable. What we need here is clear action to realize this deal between BioLease and Bolivia, to be able to produce vaccines here in our own country, to be able to ensure that the global South can access vaccines in a way that they're simply not able to right now. And so please stay tuned on what you can do to be part of the solution, to let your representatives, to let our government know that we will not accept Canada being part of the problem, but rather we need Canada to be part of the solution. And so we will continue to do this. And those of you that are part of this town hall, please stay tuned on initiatives that will be coming forward from everyone involved in this town hall, from our office, from the NDP. We would love to work with you. We need to work with you to keep applying pressure on the government of Canada. So next, we're going to hear from another round of dynamic speakers. First, we will hear from Angella McEwen. Angella is an economist with QP National, and as you know, has been very involved with the Trade Justice Network. Angella, we're so glad you're here with us today.
I am. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Nikki. Thanks for hosting this great discussion. I am co-chair of the Trade Justice Network here in Canada, and we have several public sector unions that are a part of that network. So not only do I work for a public sector union, I coordinate on trade files with other ones. And we all work with an international organization called Public Services International, which we do a lot of global solidarity work with public sector unions around the world. And so we have a history of working with health workers in countries in Europe and Africa and India. And so in October of 2020, it was obvious to a lot of healthcare workers that COVAX was not going to be the sort of market-based charity model of vaccine delivery, was not going to be good enough. And so the countries of India and South Africa brought forward a proposal to the World Trade Organization. And at that point in time, we thought we had 30 days to organize around it, and we thought there would be a decision made at the end of October. And so the Trade Justice Network and CUPE and Public Services International, we did as much work as we could do to, call members of parliament, raise this as an issue, saying, look, there is actually a way for us, because it's an emergency, to kind of lift the intellectual property waive those rights right now so that we can make sure there's enough vaccines for everyone. Because back in October of 2020, even, it was obvious that none of us were going to be safe until we were all safe. And Canada, from the get-go, neither really supported or opposed it. They sort of dragged their feet in the back end. And so originally our ask was simply for Canada to publicly support these talks. And so through Public Services International, we had petitions, we wrote letters, we had days of action where there was, protests when the World Trade Organization was meeting to have these discussions. We would have days of protest and be as loud and as vocal as we could be to pressure decision makers to do this. And it really didn't seem like it was going to they kept kicking the can down the road. And then in May, everyone was very excited because the American president, Joe Biden, actually publicly supported it. But that did not seem to have done a great amount of, we've not really gotten much further down the road in terms of getting that. So right now, the work that we're doing, we've done webinars to educate on the issue because we feel like there's a lot of acronyms there. You got CAMR, you got TRIPS, you got WTO. So there's some barriers to it. And a lot of Canadians for a while were just relieved enough to have the vaccine themselves. And we thought, okay, maybe it'll be slower, but it'll get there. But as John said, we're at this point where Canadians are looking at getting the third dose, and only 7% of lower income countries have gotten their first dose yet. So we clearly aren't going to get there with a market mechanism. We need to push and do whatever it is we can to increase the supply through, and we're not talking about not paying for it. You're talking about a compulsory license. You still pay a licensing fee, right? So we're not taking it for free. They just can't profit as much from it. And so what we're doing with the Trade Justice Network, we have on our website a letter to write MPs. We think that if they get enough political pressure from their constituents, that will help them along the right road to push the government to do two things. The first thing is to add COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics to Schedule 1 of the Patent Act. That will allow manufacturers like BioNiagara to produce generic versions of the vaccines. And then the other piece is to publicly support, to come out publicly in favor of waiving the intellectual property at the World Trade Organization to make it easier for because there's other manufacturers in India and South Africa and other places. But that's why these two countries came forward. They said, we've got excess manufacturing capacity. We could be making more of these drugs for our people. We just don't have the licenses and we don't have the know-how. So we need you to help us do this. And so we want Canada to be a force for good at the international level, pushing to make that happen. And so we think that that's one really constructive thing you can do, is make sure that your member of parliament knows that this is important to you.
Thank you so much, Angela, and thank you for your sustained work on this and the Trade Justice Network's leadership on this. I'm sure we're going to get the link up in terms of where
Yep.
where folks can write, can send that letter and follow the Trade Justice Network's work on this front. Again, you heard loud and clear, it is political pressure that we need to get Canada to step up here. So thank you so much for sharing that, Angela, and we'll come back to you with a question in a bit. Next, we're going to go to Raul Burbano, who is the program director at Common Frontiers. Common Frontiers, a national working group composed of labor, faith-based, and social justice organizations focused on solidarity in the Americas. It was created out of the fight against neoliberal trade policies. Raul, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you, Nikki. It's an honor to be here, to be part of this timely and important discussion, and also to be part of such a distinguished speakers. I'm speaking from Toronto, Ontario, a traditional lands of the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. I'll be talking a little bit about the importance, or just re-emphasizing the importance of international solidarity and some of the alternatives as well that are coming out of Latin America, because I think it's also important to look at what are the different models beyond vaccine nationalism that we've been focused on in Canada. I think vaccine equity is a symptom of a larger problem, and which is rooted in a system that prioritizes corporate intellectual rights over human rights, and a system that prioritizes corporate rights over human life. And I think we have to make that extremely clear. As has already been mentioned, we've all been impacted by this pandemic, and disproportionately, people in the global south, people of color, women are most impacted by this. Just to give an example in terms of Latin America, which is the work that we're focused on, Latin America and the Caribbean has experienced 1.5 million deaths due to the vaccine, even though we only have 8.4% of the world population. And that's not because of the lack of abilities of the government to do anything, or that's not because of vaccine hesitancy. I think I want to make that clear. The main reason is that countries have been following what they're supposed to do. So, and I think Benjamin Blanco kind of made it quite clear when he talked about exactly what Bolivia has done. They secured deals with pharmaceutical corporations. They worked with AstraZeneca to get the vaccine. They've been working through the COVAX system. They've been working at the international level to have the patents waived in TRIPS, but yet, the vaccines have bypassed them. Unfortunately, this is what we're seeing. And so I think, it's pretty clear that the corporations are prioritizing the needs of the global north over the global south. And that's really due to profit. And that's really important to kind of just hit home as well. What are some of the alternatives that we see that are coming out from the region? Specifically from Latin America, rather than prioritizing vaccine nationalism, they're now looking at sort of regional response. And this came out just recently from the Latin American and Caribbean states regional bloc meetings, CELAC, which was hosted by Mexico. And part of the work there is around self-sufficiency in health. So investing in a public healthcare system that is robust and meets the needs of its population. They're looking at stuff like regional procurement, which is really important in terms of managing the widespread vaccination plans. Now, that could be rolled out globally in a way that has solidarity and cooperation. I think that's the type of model that would make a much more important impact. Regional self-sufficiency in health matters is even more important for countries in Latin America who are suffering under what hasn't been mentioned yet is sanctions, illegal and unilateral sanctions. So countries like Venezuela, Cuba, have not been able to access the vaccine COVAX system because, for example, I was in Venezuela last week and I heard that Venezuelans weren't able to access the COVAX system because of the U.S. sanctions hampered their ability to pay for them. They just couldn't pay for it. We know that recently, as early when the pandemic took place, Cuba, there was an embargo. Because of the embargo, there was a plane that was shipping stuff for Cuba from Asia, masks and that kind of stuff. And again, that couldn't happen due to the blockade. But I think it's important to kind of not to underestimate the impact of the sanctions on some other countries. As an alternative, it's also important to recognize that Cuba has focused on vaccine sovereignty, and they are the only country in the region to have their own vaccine, Abdella, and also Soberana. So they've been producing that. They've been able to ship it to Vietnam and Venezuela, and obviously they've vaccinated the majority of their population as well. Cuba has committed to exporting the vaccine at a low cost to the world. So I think it's important that we put pressure on the Canadian government, who has failed, as Nikki and everybody has mentioned already, to do its part. Although, Canada has professed a commitment to treating the COVID-19 vaccine as a global public good, it has really lacked political will by refusing to add COVID-19 vaccine to the Schedule 1 list, and for not allowing sort of compulsory license, or for not making it happen, a compulsory license. It's clearly that they're dragging their feet on that. I think what's angered a lot of countries, a lot of people in the global South, is that the rich world stance, or the countries of the global South, of the global North, is not simply me first from a vaccine perspective, but me second and me third. Obviously now with the boosters, before, as many people have mentioned, anybody in the global South even has had one vaccine. So I think we must prioritize the development, manufacturing, and distribution of the vaccine to the global South, which means removing IP barriers so that widespread decentralization and production can be achieved. To achieve this, we have to activate, obviously, international cooperation and a solidarity movement that ensures equitable access to vaccines. We need to put that pressure here in Canada, because I think that is the biggest moral issue that we have at our time right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Raul. And of course, many of us here in Canada are very much very passionate about solidarity with people's movements in the Americas. For many, the people's movement that overthrew the coup in Bolivia, for example, was something we very much supported. And so again, here we have an opportunity where clearly Bolivia, a government that is formed by people's movement, socialist principles, is clearly at the forefront of pushing for a more equitable way of producing and delivering vaccines. And we here in Canada have the opportunity to support them here at home. And so I really appreciate the connection you're making with this opportunity and solidarity with the Americas, and as well very much appreciate your point around the devastating impacts of the embargoes and the sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba. Those are other areas that we should also be advocating in solidarity with the people of Venezuela and Cuba as well. And remember that this is all part of dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and at the global level. Thank you, Raul. And next, we're going to go to our host for today, Nikolas Barishaw from the Council of Canadians. He's the campaigner on trade and privatization for the Council of Canadians who organized this event. I also want to acknowledge again that Nikolas Barishaw was the one who put together the petition that I was so proud to sponsor. It did wrap up last week. I will be presenting it in the House, and of course, stay tuned to other initiatives. Thank you so much, Nikolas, for all of the work that you've done to bring us together today.
Thanks, Nikki, and thanks for hosting. It's been really lovely discussion so far. I want to address the kind of general question. I've been looking at the comments that we've been getting on different platforms, and it's already come up a few times. What can we do now? What are the kind of what can be done in the immediate to move forward on this issue and to get Canada to change its stance and to move towards a more equitable distribution of vaccines in the world. I would say that the demands are clear, and I think the other panelists have already kind of underlined this, but I'm just going to reiterate it because it's always important to remember. The first thing we have to do is we have to get COVID vaccines on the Schedule 1 list of essential medicines. We do that, we can get a made in Canada generic vaccine being produced out of Bioliese's factories. It'll open the door for other companies to do this. It's absolutely essential, and there's no good reason for the Canadian government to be blocking this other than political weakness and capitulation in front of the big pharma lobby. The other thing that we need to do is we need the TRIPS waiver to be supported at the WTO. There are many other countries, 120 countries by some counts, that have come out in favor of the TRIPS waiver. Canada has not, but the US has, New Zealand has. There's no reason that the Justin Trudeau government could not do that. So as far as short-term immediate demands, that's what we need to be calling for. And I think that's what we will call for in every way we can. We recently launched a petition. As Nikki was mentioning, we got 4,500 signatures on that petition, which is pretty good. It's a very good start. but I think we need to continue in this direction. I see that Zero COVID Canada, which is a group of people advocating for policies to eliminate COVID entirely in Canada, they've launched a petition on this issue too. So we can perhaps share that in the comments. If people missed our petition, they can sign that petition. Obviously, also write a letter to your MP. I think that's really important. But I think we need to also be ready to step up and do a little more, a little bit deeper organizing around this issue, because it is so fundamental. And I think there is a really big political opportunity that is before us with Omicron, especially emerging. It's really dramatized the degree to which we are playing Russian roulette in epidemiological terms. You know, the longer we let this situation of inequality exist, the higher the risk of variants of concern like Omicron emerging. We don't know that much about the epidemiology from what I've read. We don't know if it's going to be worse or if it's going to be milder, but it very well could be worse. We'll find out going forward. But the fact is, we're opening up. We're really playing with fire. We're making this a very real possibility every day that we wait. You know, it's been a year. It's been over a year since the TRIPS waiver proposal was put forward, and Canada and other countries have been dragging their feet, have been pulling out every single possible stall tactic you can imagine at the WTO in order to prevent it from going forward. John Fulton and the people at BioNiagara and the Bolivian government have been knocking on any door they can find of the Canadian government to try to get the COVID vaccines added to Schedule 1 so that they can get a compulsory license and they can produce a made in Canada COVID vaccine. They haven't had any luck. It's been months. It's been 10 months now. That's absolutely unacceptable. We really need to be able to start stepping it up and stepping up our implication. And I think the reason we need more than just signatures, we need to get organized at the grassroots level is because of the power of the big pharma lobbying. I did a researched a piece recently that was published in The Breach, and we'll share that in the comments perhaps, where it showed that the lobbying by pharma groups who are producing vaccines had increased by 88%. It had almost doubled relative to what it was before the pandemic. And so that means that the pharma companies, Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson leading the way, but also Innovative Medicines Canada, which is the lobby group that represents kind of all the big pharmaceutical companies. They were meeting with government officials at a rate of 3 to 4 times every week. So almost every day they were having a meeting with government officials and talking to them. And so we really need to be able to get together with people in our communities and do the same thing and start meeting with our local MPs, following up these letter writing campaigns with an actual, like, going to your MP and asking them, can you sit down and talk with us about this? Because we're really concerned. We realize the danger that it's putting everybody in. We're outraged by the inequality that Canada has helped foster in the world, and we need that to change. And what have you done as our local representative to stand up for it? And so I'm really overjoyed by the work that Nikki Ashton has done and others in the NDP have done around this issue, but there haven't been enough MPs speaking out about this, and they're really exposing everybody to a great deal of danger, I think, as we see with Omicron. And so there's a link that I created. It's just a simple sign-up form that we'll share. I'd ask Robert and Matt, who are assuring the back end of things. They've done a great job. If we can share that with people, it's just people's email and where you are and any other information. If you want to share it, then we can get in touch with you, and we're going to try to build these local committees to do the work that needs to be done so that the political pressure is equal to what big pharma is bringing, because I think we can beat them on this issue, even if they have lots of money and they have the lobbyists. We have the arguments are on our side. You see the government try to respond to these questions when they get asked about, why are you not supporting the TRIPS waiver? Why are you blocking this company, BioNiagara? The Trudeau government has no answers. They don't know what to say. So they just are like a broken cassette and they keep repeating the same things. So we really need to bring the pressure and force them out of that kind of comfortable space. And I think we can do it. There was a poll that was done by World Vision recently that showed 68% of Canadians supported a TRIPS waiver. 68%. So we have a clear 2/3 majority of Canadians who support it. 30% said they supported it strongly. Those are really the people we need to go out and reach out to them. And so I think if we can have those local discussions and really strategize and think, okay, well, who in my community is going to support this? Who can we get? Can we organize a local event to inform people about what's happening and just continue to spread the message and build a real movement behind a people's vaccine? I think that's what we need in this moment. And, the council and our other allies, Oxfam, we're really looking forward to working with people on this. So I'll stop there and we can do some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikolas. So we heard two clear actions. One, of course, earlier from Angella McEwen was signing the form email to your MP. This is put together by the Trade Justice Network, calling on them to pressure the government to take specific actions. You'll see it there. So we'll post that link again. And the second one you heard from Nikolas is signing this form, filling out this form so that you can be in touch with the Council of Canadians and others coordinating future actions on this front. So please, if you want to see this deal between Bolivia and BioLease come to fruition, please sign that letter. Please sign up on that form and be part of future actions, and very much actions that are targeting politicians. And I would say if your MP is not a government MP, send it to your MP, but then send another copy to a government MP that's close to you, right? Or in your area, or and of course to the relevant MPs on this front, the Prime Minister, the Ministers of Trade, of Foreign Affairs, of Health, right? So the more government MPs can hear from us on this issue, the better it is. And of course, it's good to have MPs from all parties know that this matters to their constituents, this matters to Canadians, that we want action. So now I'd like to put a question to all three of our latest panelists, Angella, Raul, and Nikolas. So we heard clearly from Nima that in her video that it's so important to have everyone vaccinated around the world. And one of our participants, Marlene Kohler, asks, what specifically do we need to do to bring pressure to expand availability of vaccines internationally? Touched on that a bit. But I'm also wondering, Angella, Raul, and Nikolas, what are you've talked a bit about what you're doing here in Canada. What is happening internationally as well on this front? I know, Angella, you touched on it a bit, Raul as well. What are other countries doing? What are movements around the world doing? And what can we do to support that work globally and here at home? Angella, would you like to go first?
Sure. This is a fantastic question. So CUPE's president, Mark, is part of the executive board of Public Services International. And the latest World Trade Organization meeting was supposed to be happening November 30th through December 2nd. But it didn't happen because of the Omicron variant, ironically. So travel restrictions meant that meeting was not held. So Public Services International held a board meeting on that day virtually and had all of their executive members make statements about what it means. And it's all variations on solidarity, that, this isn't over for any of us until it's over for all of us. And these are a lot of unions that represent healthcare workers. And so it's not just vaccines that they've been having trouble getting access to. It's also, protective equipment. It's also sick days. So there's a lot of stuff going on here where we've seen a failure of solidarity and a failure of actions to keep people safe. And so I think it's really powerful for these healthcare workers to be coming forward and to be asking for that in solidarity. So they've done all of the things that you can do. They've written letters to governments. They've held protests in front of government offices in Australia, in Geneva, in Canada. And so keeping that pressure on, I think, is important. But as we've said here in Canada, Canada really has tried to have it both ways, where They're keeping pharma happy publicly and saying we're doing, the best that we can, but then behind the scenes, they're not moving anything forward. So I really think that it's important, as Nikki said, it's not just write to your member of parliament. The letter that we have is actually going to CC the ministers of health automatically, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the International Trade Minister, and Justin Trudeau, so that every time somebody sends a letter to their member of parliament, all of these other ministers know that it's important. And then, as Nikolas said, I think it's really important if you have friends in your area to follow up that letter with a request for a meeting. And that meeting can be virtual with your member of parliament, asking for those one-on-one meetings or a group of you meetings. That's how we counter the power of the pharmaceutical lobby, because lobbies are powerful, but when it's voters that are coming to you, I'm sure Nikki can tell you, members of parliament, that carries a lot of weight when it's actually people in your riding that are telling you they care about this. So sending that letter, getting your friends to send the letter, and then following that up here in Canada, I think is the most important things that you can do.
Sure, maybe I can add. I think, the pandemic has clearly laid bare the global inequality that we see in the world sphere, where people in the global south are historically, through colonization, through racism, are continuously impacted at all levels. It's really shown the interdependency, obviously, of these issues. So we can't forget that, focusing on our own populations, whether it's workers' rights, it's healthcare, right? We have to think globally, because these issues are global issues, and working together in a common solution is the only solution we can find. And I think that's all the stats, all the specialists have already said. It doesn't work just to vaccinate your population or to get into lockdowns if other communities around the world aren't vaccinated. I think it's also shown in terms of the lack of political will, again, that the Canadian government has shown. The BioLease case, I think, is a perfect example. And it's just an example, of the inability of the Canadian government to follow through on what it says it's doing, right? We hear, wonderful words from the Canadian government, from Trudeau around that it's doing a lot, that it supports, but we see on the international level, it's dragging its feet, and locally it's dragging its feet. And I think that pressure from people in Canada, from Canadian citizens, the more pressure we can put on the Canadian government just to hold them accountable to what they say they will do, I think is an important step on that. And finally, I think it's kind of made it very clear that we need to invest in a public, robust healthcare system, right, that has access for everybody. And vaccines is one important component of that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Raul. Nikolas, did you have something to add?
Actually was thinking about just the last thing that Raul said, and I saw someone had mentioned it in the questions about, they were asking if the big pharma companies are going to threaten our supply of vaccines. If we do move on BioLease and authorize a compulsory license and support the TRIPS waiver, it's something that they've actually threatened. If you look through, there was a pretty veiled threat. They've actually made that threat back in January and in May when the issue was being debated very intensely at the WTO of the TRIPS waiver. So I think Canada was exceptionally vulnerable at that moment. There you go. There's the question. Canada was exceptionally vulnerable at that moment in May when the vaccine rollout was just happening. We are not in the same position as we were then. Canada has pretty large stores. I think the last figure I saw was something like 10 million extra doses in the central vaccine registry, vaccine supply, and then provinces have more that they're holding in their freezers as well. So we're sitting on a mountain of vaccines, and I don't think Canada has that excuse anymore. But the point that Raul brings up, which is fundamental, is why did we give up this capacity? Why did we let it be privatized and just frittered away and handed out to the multinationals? I think what's left of Connaught Labs is now owned by Sanofi, a large French multinational. And meanwhile, Cuba has developed 2 successful vaccines while under embargo. I'm sorry, if Cuba can do it, and no shade to Cuba, Cuba's amazing, but if Cuba can do it, why can't Canada do it, right? why can we not do these things? And so I think that's something that another reason why we need to organize in a more kind of longer term perspective too, is this is something we need to think about, that we need to fight for, is having a public capacity to research and to produce vaccines and other essential medicines, because it'll allow us to protect ourselves from any future pandemics. And it'll also allow us to offer greater solidarity around the world. And it's something that we did in the past, and we could do it again, you know? And so I think that that is something that we need to put in our minds right away, that, you know, we should never be in this kind of vulnerable position again vis-a-vis big pharma, because we know what the consequences are.
Well, thank you so much. Some very clear messages from Angella, Raul, and Nikolas on what we can do. Again, you will have seen a link in the chat around the letter you can sign for the Trade Justice Network that will be CC'd. So you don't need to copy and paste it, but it will be CC'd to the Prime Minister and key ministers. You've also heard about the form from the Council of Canadians. Please sign that up to be involved in future actions, including in your community. We also shared the link to the petition that Nikolas mentioned. The second petition, the first one that Nikolas had put together, that Council of Canadians had put together, that we sponsored, is unfortunately closed now, but we are very thankful to all those who signed. But there is a second one that you can sign, so we shared that link as well. And I know, speaking of political pressure, John in St. Catharines also wanted to speak about the importance of making sure that we raise this with perhaps all MPs involved, and I would say also the local MP in St. Catharines, whose riding stands to benefit very directly from a deal between BioLease and Bolivia. And I don't know if you have any thoughts to share on that, John.
Well, I have to go back to 2005 when we were successful in having oseltamivir Tamiflu added to Schedule 1. We basically put a call out to our local MP. At the time, it was a Conservative MP, and he championed the request all the way through Parliament. Again, it took 7 months. By the time we got on the list, bird flu had waned, thank goodness. And so this time around, we've been trying to get support from Minister Champagne's office, Trudeau's office, and of course, locally, at Chris Biddle's office. And what we've been told by a comms person from Health Canada is that really we need to have that local MP strategize and just take this bull by the horns and move it through Parliament. So if you can write to your local MP or even our local MP to get us the support we need, that would be great.
Thank you very much, John. And you heard it here. The local MP for St. Catharines, a Liberal MP, has not been supportive of this initiative. So maybe we can drop his contact information in the chat as well. I mean, goodness, if this was a proposal in for this kind of work in my riding, I wouldn't hesitate twice, obviously, or hesitate at all, I should say. But here we're hearing so clearly how political advocacy has mattered in the past, and how it matters in this instance as well. I really want to thank everybody who's tuned in for this town hall. We're just so thrilled that so many of you are expressing an interest in this issue, but also wanting to be part of pushing the Canadian government to allow for this deal between Bolivia and BioLease to happen, to allow Canada, to push for Canada to be part of the solution in lifting the TRIPS, supporting the lifting of the TRIPS waiver, and ensuring that all countries around the world have access to the life-saving vaccines that they need. I also want to very much thank everybody who spoke as part of this town hall. Of course, we want to thank Vice Minister Blanco, who we heard at the top, the Bolivian Vice Minister, who's been a driving force on this campaign, and not just in the context of what Bolivia needs, but also what countries in the global South need, and has shared really a vision for our world where again, people come ahead of profits. I also want to thank we heard from Brittany Lambert from Oxfam Canada. Of course, Oxfam has been a leading voice, part of the People's Vaccine Alliance, who shared critical points today on how urgently we need to move forward on this front and how this work is happening at the global level to push for action, and how important that it is for us as Canadians to be part of that. I also want to thank Luis Agil Abinader from Knowledge Ecology International, who based in Washington, D.C., who've been at the forefront of pushing this deal between BioLease and Bolivia, and who've also been very clear in the on the extent to which Canada has been part of the problem. You know, as Canadians, we don't like to think that we're being perceived negatively on the world stage, but lo and behold, here we are again blocking being part of the problem when it comes to vaccine equity and vaccine access. I also want to thank Angella McEwen with the Trade Justice Network, an economist with QP National, who's been a leading voice here in our country when it comes to this, and of course we've shared the link from Trade Justice and Network. This is how you can make sure that your MP and the Prime Minister and key government ministers know that this matters to you. There's clear calls for action in that letter. Please take a moment to sign it. I want to thank Raul Burbano from Commons Frontiers, who made a very clear link. If you're passionate about solidarity with the Americas, please be passionate about the need to support Bolivia in this quest, and of course in the broader struggle for a vaccine justice. And again, Nikolas, thank you so much for hosting this event. Please stay tuned on future actions. Please stay tuned to the work of these folks that were on this call, who are leading the charge for Canada to be part of the solution. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. And again, what we need here is political pressure. What we need here is to build a movement for vaccine justice within our own country, targeting the Canadian government that so far has been part of the problem. We have the ability to do that. And I also want to echo Nikolas's call. This is part of building a different, an alternative vision for our world, a better version of our world, where we are talking about health, people's well-being ahead of the profits of pharmaceutical companies and the biggest corporations in this world. Let's be clear, the deal between BioLease and Bolivia is good for Bolivia. It is good for Canadian workers, for our communities, for all of us. It is good for the world. It is time for Canada to act, and you are part of that. Stay tuned. Thank you so much. In solidarity from all of us. Muchísimas gracias. Merci. Thank you.